Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Literacy View. We are so excited to have you with us today. We have a special guest. It's somebody I've known for quite a while. This special guest is a parent. She also is an advocate, and she recently wrote the parent letter in response to the letter that was signed by 58 literacy experts. And I'd like to introduce you to Ashley Roberts. And Ashley, I'm so pleased to have you. And I just want to say before we begin, when I read the parent letter, there was no name at the beginning. I didn't see your name, but I read it and I said, this has Ashley all over it. Like I knew before I even found out it was you. I said, this has to be Ashley because it was so well written and so thorough that I said it had to be you. So welcome. And I would love to start with what made you do it? What brought you to the point of writing an impassioned letter like that? And, I just want to turn it over to you. Can't wait to hear.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all of those compliments. The day that the letter came out, I did see it on Twitter. And just from the headline, I knew that it wasn't going to be something that I really wanted to read that day. And so I put it off for an entire day. And I'm not like well versed in Twitter or anything, but I happened to go on the next day and everybody was talking about it. And so I read it and I cringed all the way through it, just like everybody was. And a friend of mine was talking to Dr. Michael Paff on Twitter, and he made the comment of, we all need to respond. And I was like, yeah, we do all need to respond. And I think he sort of said that as a joke, but I didn't take it as a joke. And I was like, we do need to respond. We can't sit here yet again and have another opus be dropped on top of our community and everybody just let it go by, or just let reporters comment on it. And I get sort of an obsessive itch when I feel the urge to write something. And so I literally dropped everything I was doing and I just sat there and wrote it. And I told a couple of my friends that I was writing it. And like 30 minutes later, I emailed it to them and they went, how did you do this in 30 minutes? I went, I don't know, but I did. And
That's
it kind of went from there.
Your fingerprints all over it.
So it just kind of went from there. But as soon as I'm not going to say it right, the Hechinger Report, or however,
no, it's
Faith
I
Googled
looked it up. I Googled it and I actually said it correctly. It is.
Of course you did, Faith.
Of course I did, because of phonics. It is Hechinger. That is
Hechinger.
Yes. So it's the
Okay.
CH that shows that sound. Hechinger.
Okay. Hechinger.
Hechinger Report.
So, because I'm friends with Missy Purcell, who's one of the signers on the teacher letter, there's various conversations going on in various mediums, right? As everybody's sort of discussing what's going on. I knew about the existence of the teacher letter. They got it out there for signature before I got mine out there for signature. And then I found out that, now I can't say it because I've got the soft CH stuck in my head. Hechinger. Thank you. Hechinger.
Faith's going to do a lesson about this later.
Yeah.
She's going to get us.
was going to publish the teacher's letter, and everybody that was sort of in this conversation was going, we need to get the parent letter published as well. And so I got the email for the person at Hechinger, and I sent her the letter, and it just kind of went from there. So I wanted it to be published, but at the same time, I was like, nobody's ever going to publish something like this. I mean, it just isn't going to happen. I didn't have a whole lot of faith in it. And then it did happen. You know, we worked very hard this week from Monday through Wednesday to get it, you know, professionally edited and down. And my original letter was 1,460 words, and their submissions have to be around 900 words. That's a huge edit for me. And so getting it to that point and agreeing on things and getting the links in there, it was a process, but it got up and it got published. What is today? Thursday. It got published yesterday, Wednesday. So.
And it got over 1,300 signatures, correct?
It did. Yes. And still going, I think.
So
Ashley, I just wanted to.
Yes.
So Ashley, I wanted to first of all thank you for being with us today. We really appreciate you. And I know that, you know, this whole thing has affected you personally. And I think that in literacy, what I see is a very positive thing right now is people are speaking up. Parents are starting to be more aware of what's going on. I think, you know, after the pandemic or during the pandemic, a lot of parents saw what was going on. Their children were being taught to read in a way that didn't really make sense at all. So I want to thank you. And I know, are you a soccer mom?
I am a soccer mom. That's why it's so dark. And
you know what? That's amazing that you made time, you know, to be here with us. And that, you know, it's really, really special to us. And I also wanted to say something to everybody involved. Last week was Thanksgiving. So wait, do you see my turkey? I want to say that I'm really thankful for everybody in our community at the Literacy View for really, really joining us, because I think we're very unique. You know, I have some centrist views. I was trained in different methods. I've been really, really learning the sciences for the last 6 years. But I think what makes us really unique is we don't pre-plan. We don't always have the same views, but we feel that this is a safe place where we can start talking about it. And I think that's the great thing that's going on in literacy right now. People are talking, people are thinking, and change can only happen if we really all merge together and figure out what's next.
I agree.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because, you know, our tagline is real teachers letting loose. Well, last time we had a journalist on, and now we have a parent on. And I think the way we're going to grow in education is to talk to each other. And so I love debating and talking about issues, but at the same time, and this is a problem I'm seeing, if we have opinions on social media, people go for the jugular sometimes because they're passionate about their views, and I get that. But there needs to be a way of doing this in a way where people shouldn't be afraid to speak or to write something. A lot of people just are insulting. I mean, and you know, it's easy to do that when you're upset. It's just easy to kind of let loose, especially on social media, when you send out a tweet and it's quick. So what do you think about this latest Tim Rasinski letter? And as Judy said, there are a lot of letters circulating.
A lot of letters.
A lot of open letters.
We have the parent letter, we have the teacher letter, we have the 58 signers letter, we have, is that it? Was there another one?
No, then there was the editor letter.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And we have
Tim's letter.
And Tim's letter, right.
And then we had Natalie Wetzler's piece that spoke about, you know, her views on literacy as well.
Right, which was an article in Forbes, and she had her views, and then Tim Rasinski has his views. What do you think about this? I'm curious to hear, Ashley.
Honestly, I kind of have a lot of thoughts. I know, Faith, you and I have spoken in the past specifically about how much emotion exists, and the emotion exists for various reasons, right? I think I've been doing this for enough years, especially for my own child, that where I am is I feel like the people that are on the side of the education community, of course, there's a lot of defensiveness that comes in with that. And I think part of that is by design. I think Emily brought that up, how, Heinemann started publishing books in the 70s that were more focused kind of from a political perspective to sort of bring, in my opinion, some divisiveness between educators and parents. But, educators have an incredibly difficult job. They're not paid enough. There's not enough resources. And, you go into a school district, you're working as a teacher, you have to teach the curriculums that they provide, right? And so people are making decisions about curriculums based on what they've been educated about and what's been going on for a long time. So there's a certain amount of defensiveness that comes in from that side of things when people feel that they're being challenged. Parents have an enormous amount of emotion because our children are being failed. So our children are, I don't use this word lightly, but our children are being traumatized by the fact that they're not being educated. As a parent, when your child is being traumatized and you're in the system fighting constantly within the system, it in turn then traumatizes the parent. There's a lot of extreme things that happen to our children too. Let's talk about the fact that their amygdalas are not fully developed, and a child, can't look at you and go, you know what, this isn't really working for me, and it's not working for me because of X, Y, and Z factors. And I think that if we could do A, B, and C, then I might be able to exhibit more success in this task that you are expecting of me. A child is wholly and completely incapable of doing that. What a child's going to do is shut down or get angry or throw a book or have a temper tantrum or start crying or doing all of these things. And then you have, when you're in a situation where the child is losing control and maybe the adult is losing control, and you're in a state that has laws like Florida's Baker Act or something like that, your child can end up being incarcerated or, stuck in a mental health facility for a few days. That happens a lot more than it needs to. That's the very extreme end of that. And that does happen to our dyslexic children as well. But I was just talking to a mom this morning whose child is a year and a half away from finishing the K through 12 system. This mom she's a powerful voice. She's been trained in by numerous people who have advocacy certifications. She's dyslexic herself, so she gets it. She has just training coming out of her ears. She asks the best questions. She's not afraid to go into a fight. And she was sharing with me how difficult it is for her right now. She's depressed, she's sad. And I said, because it's your child. And you know what your child needs, and you're asking, you're in a room asking for what you know that your child needs, and you're being told no. Mm-hmm. That just kicks you in the mom feels all day long. And it strips away what power we feel we have as parents. And that makes it really, really, really hard. From a social media perspective, I think that because there's so much trauma on the parent side of the community, yes, you're going to sometimes get a lot of emotion within it. So when you've got one side speaking from a defensiveness and another side speaking from trauma, I think it's hard to bridge that gap between the two. And I would like to see cooler heads prevail in those types of conversations. I think it's going to take some effort to get there. But I had a lot of people tell me that the first version of my letter, the one that was on the open letter link, some people refused to sign it because they were like, you're too emotional. And I went, because I'm angry. but on the flip side of that, where I am is, I am a professional. I do have a career. I can negotiate multi-million-dollar deals. I can keep a cool head. I'm perfectly capable of doing that all day long. But where I am is parents are always told, be nice, bring cookies, buy gifts. You don't want to anger anybody. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that. But your child is denied, 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 denied. I'm really tired of being nice. I can convey anger without slamming my fist or using curse words or calling you names or doing anything else. And that's what I was attempting to do in that letter, was convey, we're angry and we have the right to be angry, and stop telling parents you shouldn't be angry, because that is absolutely stripping away everything that it is to be a parent. Because again, you're getting kicked all day long in the mom feels, right?
Yes.
Where Tim, I have a lot of mixed emotions about Tim's letter. And I have a lot of mixed emotions about a lot of the conversations that have been happening since Sold the Story happened. I think the Sold the Story podcast was brilliant. I can see the multiple points of view about the various opinions that have come out against Sold the Story. I can navigate that path. I can understand the multiple sides. And it's, what I said to one person, and I think I said this to you, Faith, was, for somebody like me who I've had OG training and I have advocacy training and, I've got all of these things. I didn't hear Sold a Story as being purely about phonics, but maybe that's because I've got the whole rope in my head and I'm making in my mind what are those logical connections, and I'm hearing maybe what other words that aren't necessarily being expressed because I have all that knowledge inside my head. And so that's why I think that I can see perhaps multiple views about how people are interpreting what happened, or what was said, I should say, on Sold a Story. Do we need to be talking more about fluency? Absolutely. Do we need to be talking more about comprehension? Absolutely. And I know, again, I keep referencing you, Faith, but I know you so well. We've had so many conversations I remember calling you almost a year and a half ago after a new set of diagnostics was run on my child, because his original tutoring was through Linda Mood Bell. And so every year I take him back to Linda Mood Bell because that's the benchmark that I have, and those diagnostics are rerun. And I wanted to talk to you specifically about that fluency piece. I don't know if you remember that conversation, because his fluency fell backwards. His comprehension gained, his everything gained, but fluency fell backwards. Mm-hmm. And I called you because I went, help me understand. And I remember I was even crying. But I was just like, just help me understand. I mean, because I didn't understand fluency at the time very well. I understand it a lot better now, but I was just going, yeah, help. I don't get it.
Yes.
And so from that perspective of me, I really get a lot of the points that Tim was trying to make in the letter. But I think where Tim misstepped is he signed the letter of 58.
Bingo. Judy, jump in, because that, I think, was a big mistake. And all I could say is Karen Vates on Twitter said exactly what I said to you ladies the other day. If you remember, I said, I think he made some very good points. I wish this letter came out at a different time and that he didn't sign that opinion letter with the other 57. Judy, your thoughts?
So I know what you're saying. We know who signed that letter, and we've talked about her on the show many, many times. Lucy signed the same letter. So for me, it's really hard, just in general, just me as a person, I always try to believe in the good of most people. And I think that, Tim's signing of the letter wasn't in malice. I definitely believe that his point was that there's more to literacy than just the pillar of phonics and so forth. Because, many people think that everybody knows that, but that's not true. I've been working in schools for years, and a lot of principals don't know that rote by heart. They don't live and breathe it. They haven't been investing time like I have for the last 6 years, really embracing, the science and shifting. Because everybody on this show knows I was trained in read and recovery. I'm not embarrassed of it. I don't feel like I'm a terrible person. There were some best practices in it, but you know what? I shifted, and I did see that there are people like me who have made the shift as well, and many of our listeners have. So I think the intentions were good. I really do, because fluency is a very important part of reading. But does it have to be done only with leveled books? No. So right now I'm working with the little guy, and we're working on phrasing and fluency using decodable text. So yes, the first time the child reads the sentence, it's kind of hard even to decode those CVC words, but there's no reason you can't say, okay, now go back and reread that sentence again. So I'm pushing myself as a practitioner. And Ashley said something really, really meaningful, but I want to share an experience, and I've shared it on a prior episode as well. So I recently worked with a little 6-year-old. At the end of kindergarten, the teachers were like, oh, he can't read. So over the summer, he did literacy boot camp with me in my little studio. And you know what? Now he's able to decode CVC words. He doesn't even have to touch them. He's able to do it automatically with his eyes. And this little kid, who's only 6 years old, he told me, Miss Judy, you keep telling me to sound out the word and look at the word and slide. My teacher is telling me, don't make the sounds and use the picture. That's not acceptable. We all know that shift needs to happen. I don't care if you're reading recovery or science of reading only, or if you're centrist, come on. And this isn't a wealthy town that I live in. That's not funny. And then, guess what? I joined that child and his family at a PPT. I didn't take $1, but I was there to say, this has to stop. You guys are not following the science. Oh, but the picture's great. You know what? Shame on you. You're still using Lucy's older program. I don't know how her new program is, but shame
Nobody
on them.
does.
Shame on them.
That's true.
And you know what? You know what's funny? I know both of you have mentioned Heinemann. Guess what? So we know a lot of those programs are kind of, oh, we're not going to use that one. Heinemann just made another program. It's called Into Reading. And now it's on the approved list. So to be continued, we'll see. Is it really aligned with the science? Are kids really making progress? I think the thing that has to happen more often is looking really closely at the data and thinking a little bit more carefully. And what I appreciate about everybody in our literacy world is we're listening to each other. We're having those hard conversations. We're not being ashamed to say, oh, I used to do this and now I do that. I didn't throw out my leveled library because maybe kids could use it when they're, they crack the code and they could just enjoy those stories. So I think it's important to be open-minded, to be flexible, and to shift.
So I'm going to jump in a little bit about the fluency issue. I could tell you that I see so many kids. I get them from school districts from all over, and they've had actually programs that are considered explicit, systematic, and they're getting some of these programs, and yet they're still tapping away, tap, 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 tap.
When are they tapping? Are they tapping when they're reading or spelling?
They're tapping when they're reading.
See, that could be a problem.
Yes, it's a big problem. You can't understand if you're tapping every word.
Right.
So, now, that has to be taught. You have to teach fluency. And so you could have these programs that are approved, that parents are asking for, and that everyone considers to be, approved, scientific, systematic. But if we're implementing it in a way where we're not pushing fluency, or we're not giving kids enough time to become fluent, then that isn't the whole story, right? But I do think, getting back to the Emily Hanford podcast, that the point of the podcast, and I've said this before, was to really focus on an area where it was clear, deceptive practices over time, where a few people with power were running the show for years and years, and that basically, even though we knew better over 20 years ago, I was part of Reading First, I was part of that movement, and yet we were blocked at every turn. And by the way, by many of the same people who had signed that letter, part of the 58. So to see their names again appear, I kept saying, well, history repeats itself. Here we go again. It's the same pattern of these people who will come in and say, well, we all have to work together, and we all have to play nice. And, it sounds so reasonable, doesn't it? Like balance, the word balance is so balanced, isn't it? It's just such a balanced word where it sounds reasonable. It sounds like the people who are on the side of systematic, explicit literacy, structured literacy, sound so to one side, almost like a political
Right.
side where that we don't want to hear anything else, and they're the more reasonable people. But what is happening is we have parents like Ashley and so many others. She's just the face of the parents right now, and because she wrote the letter, it's symbolic having her here. But we have parents who are just absolutely frustrated in seeing this game back and forth, and how it appears as though, when they mention this balance, that the parents are being unreasonable, teachers who believe in the science of reading are being unreasonable, and they come out looking like, oh yes, you know what, it's so much more than phonics. That's not the point here. And, going back to Natalie Wexler, when she was on, she said some very powerful things about comprehension and writing instruction. Tim Rasinski says some powerful things about fluency. Both these people really are bringing up very good points.
100%.
But in the big picture of things, what we have to really focus on is that what was going on in comprehension was not adequate. The Lucy comprehension was not adequate. So even if you put phonics in for a half hour and whatever it was, I don't care, even if it was done very well, when you're combining that with leveled books, and then kids are being mixed up, not knowing whether they should use their phonics skills or they should just then guess, as you said, Judy, or actually being instructed to do other things, but at the same time getting phonics, you're mixing the kids up. So we never really got phonics right. That's the point. We might say we had phonics, but we never really got it right. And we never did all those other pieces correctly to have a serious tier 1 curriculum that actually works.
Faith, can you just, for our viewers, there might be some that want to know what you mean by tier 1.
Thank you. I know sometimes we speak in names. Good point. So tier 1 would be what the mainstream general ed classroom gets, where all the kids get that instruction for all. And that's really where it's at. If that is done poorly, I don't care if kids are being pulled out and getting everything that's on their IEP. If they go back to that classroom and the classroom overall is being given things that could lead those kids in the wrong direction, Intervention takes longer, it's not effective. You have to start at tier 1. And that's why, again, I'm so proud of the district I'm working with. I'm going to say it again, Lynbrook School District. I just love them because they are just taking this seriously, starting at tier 1 and trying to do the right thing.
Faith, when are you inviting me to visit Lynbrook?
Well, I could always speak to the assistant superintendent.
And I think that's the important thing. And I think that's the important thing that has to happen. If something really good is happening, Faith sees it, but we need more people in the United States, all over the world, seeing best practices being applied. Because I think for a really long time in New York City, we've been doing science of reading practice, even though people don't know. Phonics, phonics, phonics. Many classes still have terrible data. I think what Faith mentioned is extremely important. We have to look at the entire literacy block and what that looks like. Because, guided reading is still happening. I've had some success with some kids in guided reading. I can't say that I didn't, but if we're going to align it more with the science of reading, even like 10 years ago, they said strategy groups. I think the thing that's difficult, and for a lot of teachers, we don't know what the perfect literacy block should look like. You know what I mean? And you know what? And the problem stems much deeper than just Lucy, because Lucy is one of the programs. There were schools that don't have Lucy's program that write their own curriculum, do-it-yourself models. So for a half hour, they're seeing, a great phonics program. They get a splash of Hegarty for their phonemic awareness, and then they're getting crap the rest of the literacy block.
Ashley, your thoughts.
So I want to go back to something that you said, Faith, about, the word balance seems so reasonable. Language is such a powerful weapon. And people who know how to manipulate language in order to serve a specific means truly have the greatest arsenal ever.
Yeah.
And like, for example, my career is something where all I do day in and day out, I negotiate for a living. That's what I do. It's what I've been doing for over 12 years. I have a deep, abiding appreciation for language, for the words that are chosen, for how it is delivered, for what is not said, what is the body language saying. There are so many ways to communicate. To me, those 58 not all of the 58 signers, because we repeatedly see some of those signers, constantly step in it and tread it everywhere, and have people almost throwing stones at them after speeches. But at the same time, the majority of those people have such a great understanding of language and how to manipulate it in order to seem like the one that is being the most reasonable. And they've got an army of people behind them in order to help them ensure that the message that is coming out is one that is sounds so reasonable, but it's so contrived in order to achieve a certain means. And when you're dealing with, it's really one of the most genius manipulations ever, because when you're dealing with emotional camps, i.e. the teachers who are defensive and the parents who are traumatized, if you can be the one who's calm and you just seem so reasonable and just, it's a genius manipulation, because then you can dismiss the people who are being emotional as, they're just emotional. And as women,
Yeah.
let's talk about the history of women being dismissed because of the emotions that they have. And within the dyslexia community, at least, the bulk of the voices are female. It's just, let's just dismiss them because that's just a hysterical woman. Why do we need to give that any justification whatsoever? And just as an example, do you cry in an IEP meeting? Yes or no? Some people are going, I think it's a powerful thing to cry in an IEP meeting. And I'm sitting here going, no, the second that tear rolls down your face, the person that's trying to manipulate you owns you. Because I want to drive the person on the other side of the table from me to an uncomfortable level or crying or something like that, because then I own them. So, because I need to
I'm
be
a
the one who's
crier.
got.
I would
learned
be
not to.
awful. Honestly, I cry when I'm angry. I cry when I'm sad. I'm a crier.
No, I became
I'm
a
a crier
barracuda
too.
during. Oh, sorry about that. I became a barracuda at these meetings sometimes, especially if my own kid is involved. I learned the hard way that, what's that saying? Nice guys finish last, or nice ladies finish last. Yeah,
Yeah.
nice doesn't get me very far sometimes.
And if it makes you feel bad, I am absolutely a crier too, but because of my career, I know how to control my emotions in certain situations. And two, I have a skin condition that, if I can't control my emotions, my face will turn like bright red. You can read all my emotions. So I have to stay really, really calm in order to keep my face from turning bright red as well. Um, so I think, that's one of the things that we need to be talking about, though, is this. It's flat out genius. They seem reasonable while you've got two deeply emotional camps, and they're using language as a weapon, and that can be devastating. But at the same time, I meant to mention this to both of you the last time we spoke, but I don't know if you saw the tweet put out by Amina McLean, and she's the Australian educator. She has her own blog, and I meant to text it to you, but she said, "Is it just me, or are the science of reading versus the science of literature people at each other's throats? And do the terms now make you just want to just run in the other direction?" And a couple of people are commenting that, going, "Here, here, I absolutely agree." And I read that and I was like, we can't say that. But that's calling out the situation that I think is being manipulated, and everybody is being treated as a pawn on a chessboard, being moved into a position in order to make that statement true.
Mhm.
I want to embrace the anger. I want to be talking about the anger because I think it's the only way for people to get to the other side of the anger and maybe find that reasonable voice. But I think that parents need to stop being quite so nice. Now, when I say that, I don't mean, start slamming your fists on the table and start cursing and start throwing things at people. There's a way to communicate anger without raising your voice, or being cruel. And I think that that's an art form that maybe we've lost, or at least in our culture, it's easier to throw something instead of expressing anger without being condescending or cruel. And we need to get back to a place where we can express that anger in a way that's still constructive.
Well, it's interesting that you say this because, I'm going to go back to Tim Rasinski's letter.
Mm-hmm.
And he said in this, I have been called a host of names on Twitter,
And that's not cool.
other social media, including stupid, ignorant of the research, uncaring, and have been characterized, among other things, as a child abuser.
Wow.
And responsible for sending kids to jail. So, and I read the whole thing.
I got goosebumps from
Yeah,
that.
I read this from beginning to end. And it really, I have to say, it's very disturbing because honestly, I've been in education for a long time, and I have Tim Rasinski's books, and I think, like he said, he's been doing this for over 40 years. And I think that he made a huge mistake in signing this letter with these other literacy people, because I think what happened is people see him now as almost walking both sides, walking the line and trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth. And yet, when you read this letter, at least it appears to me that his intention was to say, like, we really need to widen this and look at the whole picture. At least that's what was on paper. But after he signed that letter, it's like it goes out the window. People just are not really looking at that. I don't know. I mean, I just felt terrible reading something like that, because I've been attacked many times. Believe me, and I've said this, I have a target on my back, either, parents attacking me or teachers attacking me, that, I'm anti-teacher. If I speak about things where I, feel for the parents, you can't win in this world. So only people who really have worked with me or see what I do will know that I try to do my best in terms of presenting a fair assessment of what I see. And, in reading Tim Rasinski's letter, when he got to the very end of his letter, he said, I have received, and you'll appreciate this as a parent with a child who struggled with dyslexia. He wrote, I have received several notes from concerned parents of children experiencing severe difficulty in learning to read, asking me about this thing called reading fluency. Just what is it, and why they have not learned about it previously? Perhaps these are parents and families who need and deserve to learn the whole story. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts?
I think it's even more than parents that need to understand the whole story of what fluency is. I feel that universally speaking, fluency is profoundly misunderstood. One of my more favorite conversations that I've had on the podcast that I have is I had Jan Hasbrook on. Mm-hmm. Specifically to talk about fluency. Mm-hmm. And the point of my podcast is to educate and empower parents. And so when I bring people on, like, Louisa Moats or Jan Hasbrook, I'm like, or Faith. You need to come back on.
Nobody's brought me yet. No, actually, out of you two.
But because you can go to all these conferences and people want to talk in edubabble, which is a word that I love from Facebook, and I have used it ever since because it's just perfect. It's a perfect word. But people speak in either edubabble or they want to get into the data in such a way that it's not meaningful for parents. And so I want to encourage a platform where the conversations are meaningful for parents. And so I brought Jan on and I said, okay, Faith has done a lot in explaining fluency to me, but what, this conversation needs to be about the fact that parents don't understand the fluency piece, really. Let's talk about fluency. And she said one thing that I adored, and I've quoted her several times in the pieces that I've written since I interviewed her, which was that fluency is a two-part thing as well. You have all of the strands of the rope. You have to be fluent at each strand as well. I mean, in order to ultimately be able to wrap that rope together and achieve reading fluency where the rope intertwines. Mm-hmm. And, specifically talking about phonics, like the example that you gave earlier, a 30-minute session isn't enough. We're not allowing our children to become fluent in phonics. But we're also not encouraging the rest of the strands because we're doing some phonics, but we're doing 3 cueing with everything else. Or let's do silent sustained reading. Let's talk
where the
about
books are upside down for some kids that they I've seen upside down books, or I've seen like center time where kids are clipping the letters of the alphabet 6 weeks in a row. They're just clipping. Yeah, I could see how that could totally be counterproductive. I agree.
Right. Or let's talk about comprehension strategies. I am so sick of the word inferencing. I can't even see straight because it was every IEP meeting I went to for my son. It still happens. Your child really needs to work on his inferencing. I'm like, no, that's not no. And I remember one IEP meeting shortly before the COVID pandemic began, where I don't even remember the specificity of the assignment, but my son was telling me about this thing that he had to do. And so, I managed to get my hands on it, and the IEP meeting happened to be the next day. And I went into the IEP meeting and I started asking them a lot of questions specifically about this specific assignment. And they all walked straight into it. They're answering my questions like, I don't understand why you're not understanding this. And I said, you're teaching deconstruction to fifth graders. Deconstruction is a college level concept, but you're attempting to teach deconstruction to a fifth grader who doesn't even understand syntax and grammar. What on earth are y'all doing?
And that's kind of what Natalie Wexler was talking about as well. And we've mentioned the piece about writing. And again, all of these are good points, but did we need to really jump on this with the whole Sold a Story, Emily Hanford podcast? That's what it really boils down to. It's not that these areas are incorrect. Every point that Natalie made, that Tim made in his letter, I think, look, Judy and I are teachers. I can't imagine us disagreeing with anything that either one of them said in terms of writing instruction, comprehension, and working explicitly on fluency. However, the point is, the Sold a Story was really, in my mind, to expose a problem that has existed for many years, where certain people were able to get away with pushing their programs without really any real evidence that it worked. That's problematic. So now we have a lot of this fighting within, where people are attacking each other and calling each other traitors and names, and you're an idiot and you're this, when how else are we going to get anywhere unless we talk and we discuss things? We're going to stay stuck.
But I would say too, a two-part statement is, one, who was the audience for Sold a Story? Was it educators or was it parents? Because to me, the audience was more geared towards parents than it necessarily was for educators. And my second point with that is, I remember having a conversation with somebody a couple of years ago who, she was very specifically pushing me on the balanced literacy versus science of reading thing. And she was in my district. She was specifically talking about my district. She was like, I don't understand why this conversation is so difficult. And I said, because we sound like conspiracy theorists. We know, we're informed. I went, but nobody sees the literacy crisis. Nobody, the average person on the street doesn't get it. They think that their kids learning how to read, and maybe they are, maybe they aren't, they're struggling a little bit, so they're going to send them to Sylvan Learning Center or something like that and pay thousands of dollars, for something that may or may not work for their child. But the fact of the matter is, people don't see it. And to the extent that people don't see it, I don't know, you both may remember this, but like all of the major news stations, I think it was a Dateline story though, ran this particular story about a mother in Baltimore. Single mom, couple of kids. Her oldest was about to graduate from high school. He couldn't read. He had failed every grade since like second grade. And she's sitting here, you know, going back to the school going, and you know, and it's a Black family, and everybody, she's going back to the school going, how did this happen? How did we get here? Why are we here with my child about to leave high school and he can't do math, he can't read, he can't write, he can't do all of these things? There were thousands and thousands of comments when that story hit social media. You know, who's Dateline? NBC. I knew what the comments were going to be, and I still clicked on the comments because I wanted to read them. Every single comment that I read blamed the mother. It was 100% her fault. She was a terrible parent.
Really?
The position that her child was in was absolutely 100% her fault.
You know, that's interesting. And that's unfortunate.
That's the position that we're in as parents. The failure of our children is allegedly our fault. Well, did you read to your child? If you would just read to your child.
Right.
That's the beginning of the parent shaming, to shift the blame from the educational establishment to the parent. So to me, because I sound like a conspiracy theorist, you know, when I talk to people, even in my own family, I love my sister to death. She has a dyslexic child. She doesn't get why I do what I do, why I fight the way that I fight. She's like, 504 is great. I don't understand. You know, that's a whole like episode all onto itself, but we don't talk about it because we can't talk about it because she doesn't get where I'm coming from, because I just sound like I'm making a big deal out of nothing. And I think to most of the people, that's how all of this sounds. And to me, that's why Emily's reporting is so powerful, is because it puts this great big shining light on what's happening to our children in this country. I mean, the new NAEP number is what, 68% now of our fourth graders can't read proficiently?
Went up since the pandemic. Yes, it was
by 3 points. Yeah, by 3 points. That's a significant increase.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
so can I jump in?
People need to be scared. Yes, please. I'm shutting up, I swear.
So a lot of the things that you say I can actually relate to. So one of the things that I wanted to say first is, I feel like in education, there's a blame game. And I don't think that's going to help solve the problem. I'm very focused on solutions, but I often, you know, even I've seen teachers and they're like, oh, the parent, exactly what you said, they don't read with their kid, or they don't talk to their kid. You know what I say to a lot of the teachers? And I myself am still a teacher, but I act as a coach. You have those kids for 7 hours of the day. What does that 7 hours look like? And very often, let me tell you something, teachers feel helpless. They don't have that much control. They have a principal or a superintendent who says, this is the way it's going to be. You better be doing your guided reading this way. You better be doing phonics for 30 minutes. God forbid if you do it for 31 minutes. You need to use leveled literacy. Oh my God, you're using the decodable. That's not rigorous enough. So there's a lot happening. And the teachers that I know are, you know, the blame game has to stop. We can't blame the parents. You know, parents should read to their kids. Of course, we know that, but we have to think, we have those kids for 7 hours. We spend a lot of time with them. So teachers, start being brave. Have those discussions with your principals. And I hope principals are watching Sold the Story too. Do I think it's the whole story? It's not. Do I think the 5 pillars of literacy plus writing are really important to think about? I do.
But structured literacy is all that.
Right,
No,
but we haven't,
it wasn't.
you know,
right?
Faith, but many schools have been doing, like I said, phonics really well.
Arguably.
I don't know. We're using
I
data trackers.
disagree.
We're using data trackers, and I work in very poor school districts.
Tap, 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 tap.
No, I put sentence strips, or I asked them to put a sentence strip in their classroom, tap to spell, slide to read. But
Yeah.
anyway,
Well,
and listen to this. Listen to this. The fact that we say schools are shifting is bullshit. You know why?
well, you didn't even press your bullshit
My button is, the batteries ran out. You know why? Teacher ratings in many schools are directly related to leveled literacy running records. So how the hell are you saying shift and we're doing this, then we're doing Acadian screeners and we're doing oral reading fluency? Guess what? The principals in many schools are looking more at that leveled literacy because that's what the school ratings are based on. That's what the teacher ratings are based on. And one more thing. I was talking to a kid who's in middle school recently. And we were just having this really open discussion. And it's amazing how bright kids could be that do have some issues and so forth in terms of, reading or spelling. And the kid made me a little graphic. I don't know if you could see it.
No, you're disappearing.
So basically, the kid in 2 seconds of a discussion with me said, you know what, Miss Judy? It starts at the colleges. What are those colleges teaching the teachers that are affecting the students? And the students become teachers. So we have to think about what does college prep look like?
That's another episode.
There's one college that's now shifting towards the science of reading. But listen, it starts at the colleges. I learned syllable types. Wait, let me take a drink of water. I fell in, and I know Faith and I, we go back and forth with the syllable type conversation, but I learned syllable types 6 years ago because I knew that a lot of the kids that I was working with in reading recovery, I couldn't help them decode those words. And a lot of those kids were ENL students. They would look at that first letter and that's where it stopped. That is not okay. So I said, you know what? That's messed up. I fell in love with syllable types. I learned those 6, or actually, according to OG, there's 7. And now I can specifically help kids decode words so much better. Reading is not that tricky, right? What's the percentage of how much of our English language is tricky? Faith, do you know?
So some people will say that 15% would be a little bit more difficult, that it's 85% is decodable, but then it could go way up depending upon the program and what people say. And then they'll say that it's a lot higher, where it's very easy to decode if you know the code, right, and you know how to
all the rules.
Well,
right. And you know what?
You don't even have to know all the rules.
Yeah, I know.
Not well, and no, but I'm going to say,
I know what you're saying.
Well, there are programs that don't have rules or syllable types, and I don't want to get into that right now.
I know what you're talking about. I have those in my little.
I do want to say this. I want to wind up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to quote something from Ashley's letter that says, we all possess PhDs in our children and we see their struggle. And, they highlighted that, Ashley, on the cover of the opinion letter. And I do think that was a great line to pull out, that we all possess PhDs in our children. And the point is that there should be more parent input and more collaboration. And I think that all around, people need to know how to speak to each other. Because I could tell you, Ashley, on the other end, I'm going to put my teacher hat on. And there are parents who will, torture teachers like every day. And they will, where teachers are abused too, and I just want to make that clear that it's not like there are parents that only do this correctly. There are plenty of parents who also, and I've seen it, who can go after teachers, and teachers are trying their best, at least many of them are. And, I just want to say that my last thought in all this is, with all these opinion letters, my opinion is we need to learn how to speak to each other without people getting defensive, without people getting so enraged that they walk away or shut the door on a conversation. That's pretty much my last thought. Judy, your last thought?
So my last thought is, we have these letters, we have many people talking. Let's start talking about solutions on what we're going to do next to make sure that it's not going to be years and years and years. I really strongly feel we can't just go one pillar at a time, because the child's not going to be in that same grade forever, right? It keeps moving and moving and moving. So please, let's think about that literacy block. Let's think about what is happening for those, how many hours? Some schools do 90 minutes, some schools do 60 minutes.
20, yeah, even up to
how many?
Even up to 2 hours. It depends on the school district, anywhere from 60 to 120 minutes.
Yeah, and I would also want to
my schools have always been 2 hours.
Yes,
They
some of
say
them.
my son's in 8th grade, it's still 2 hours.
So the other thing I wanted to say is, I want to thank Emily Hanford for exposing that there is a big problem. And I think everybody's intentions, that's my feeling, is everybody wants to do the right thing. Maybe some people signed the wrong letter. I don't even want to sign anything today, because I feel that, somebody's not going to
I signed
whatever
letter.
I want. You know what it is? I want love, and I'm freaking afraid of signing any letter, because I never fit into a box. I am who I am. I'm uniquely myself. I'm not embarrassed of my old training. I'm happy that I'm still continuing to grow. Did I throw everything out from the past? No. But everybody, think about what's going on. No matter what program you're using, think about best practices. And also, Tim Rasinski, I want to thank you for your word ladders. You're not just the fluency guy. You've done a lot of great work in literacy. And I hope people are kind during these discussions, because we could only move forward if it doesn't feel like a political war or war. That's it.
Ashley?
So I'm going to kind of say the same thing that both of you are saying, but I'm going to say it in a slightly different way. People need to be willing to have the conversation. And that's, I think, the primary key. I feel that it's incumbent upon each of us as individuals to constantly have a growth mindset. We're all human. You know what? We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get in our emotions. Everybody's going to have those moments where you'd rather just sit down on the floor and kick your feet and slam your hands and cry. That's just part of the human condition. But we are each responsible for putting the emotion aside and being open with both your heart and your mind, open to hear the person on the other side express what they are trying to express, listen with an open heart and open mind, just like I just said, and be willing to change your ideas and thoughts. But we're not in a position yet, I feel very strongly, where people are doing that. Everybody's got their camps, because again, like I said earlier, there's so much emotion entrenched I'm saying both sides, but to me, there's 3 sides to this. But I also feel like we've all been manipulated into this position over decades, so that, this is where we are. This is by design. But if we're going to get to the other side of any of this, the science of reading people, the balanced literacy people, the publishers, whomever, everybody has to be willing to admit where they're wrong, accept what is right, acknowledge it, learn from it, and move on. But that's being willing to be open to the conversation. You know, Tim Rasinski was one of the key authors in that review of Lucy Calkins' curriculum. What was that, 2020?
Yes.
And so I was a huge fan. And then he signed that letter and I went, I'm sorry, what?
Yes.
You don't,
Me
you
too.
Can
don't,
I ask one question? Can I
Yeah.
ask one question? So about those 58 signatures, did everybody see the other person's signature while they were signing? Could it be that somebody signed first and that other name wasn't on there, or no?
I heard that they were all at a conference together. I don't know if that's true.
Just asking. Just
That it
curious.
was the Reading Recovery Conference was just happening in what, Iowa or something like that? I don't know.
Probably Ohio.
I'm not really sure. All I could say is I think you made some very strong points, and it's been a pleasure to have you on, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley.
And
Thank you.
yes,
Thank you for having me.
well, we're grateful that we had a parent who could articulate this as well as you could in a way that people understand, and your passion certainly comes through. And this letter was outstanding, and I was proud to sign it. And I do think that, right now, Judy and I on the Literacy View, really, our hope is to open the conversation, to do everything you just said, that you just, ticked off. Those are important points. And we hope that people will start thinking a little bit instead of just accepting. Think, know the issues, and we're happy that we were able to talk tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.
Bye.
And wait.
Bye.
What?
And join us on our new YouTube channel.
Oh, yes.
Great, tell them about it.
No, go ahead.
All right, so we shifted to a new YouTube home, and we'll be posting it all over the place. Please like us on our YouTube page, join our Literacy View Facebook group. We do some Twitter. We're out there. So let us know what you think, and we would love to hear from all of you.
Great point. I'm glad you remembered. Okay, good night.
Good night.